Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be running you through one piece of gear that really helps to transform my autumnal photography. At the moment it's mid-October. You can probably see behind me the leaves are sort of just starting to turn colour. The woodland floor is just covered with leaf litter at the moment, so the leaves are changing and falling, and this one piece of gear really helps to just transform my autumnal photography and means that my gear just is maximised. And I really highly recommend that if you don't have one of these things in your camera bag, then what are you waiting for? You need to get one. It's super cheap, super lightweight, and it just stays in there all year round, but this time of year it really comes into its own for autumnal photography. So the light is fading. I've got a couple of hours until the sun's due to set, so yeah, let's get to it. So the item that I'm going to be talking about today are these. I'll just jump out of the frame quickly so you can see it and it will focus on it. So these are macro extension tubes. If I put them apart, they look like that. So there's two of them, and basically they allow you to get a little bit closer to your subject. So whatever the minimum focus distance is on your lens, these will allow you to get even closer than that, and quite a bit closer actually. So they allow me to, basically I have got rid of my macro lens. I don't have a macro lens at the moment because I find that for most of the things that I'm shooting, this allows me to get as close as I want to. So they're made by the popular Amazon brand Newer. I know everyone's probably got something in their kit made by Newer, and they don't have the best reputation in the world. They're known for being a little bit cheap and flimsy at times, but there are, believe it or not, the odd few things that are actually quite good made by them, and these actually only cost about £30, so they're very cheap, easy to put in your bag. They don't weigh much, so they're nice and compact to have in there at all times. And what we've got two of them. So one is 10mm, that's the smaller one here, and then we've got the other one which is a 16mm. So put them both together and they allow you to get as close as possible to your subject. I find them really useful, and like I said, this time of year in autumn I do a lot of fungi photography, so it's something that I absolutely love to search for in the woodland, and I find it really cool to find interesting colourful ones and, you know, different ones that I've never seen before. So I find these to be so useful at this time of year. So we're going to have a look around the woodland for something that fits the bill in terms of being able to go as close as possible. We'll see what they're capable of, we'll see how tiny we can go, but let's just put these to the test. These are actually new to me, so I actually had a different set until earlier on this year, and I actually lost them on a hike. That was one of my it was the Somerset rainforest hike. If you haven't watched that video yet, it's a really good video, I highly recommend it. So have a look up here. It's 2 parts, but if you've got a free Sunday afternoon and a cup of tea, you know, it's really good. So it explores some of the really cool habitats that are lost in Somerset, so highly recommend it. Right, let's have a go with these and see how we get on. So for this first shot, I've actually removed the center column from my tripod. That allows me to get really close to the ground. So this is as close as I can get without inverting the tripod and putting the camera upside down, basically. That's quite a faff with my tripod, so even this takes, you know, a good 5 minutes to set it all up and everything. So I've taken out the center column, and I'm going to shoot as close to the ground as possible for this first one, and it's looking really lovely, and I'm not actually sure if it's going to need the extension tubes for this first one, but this is a good test just to blow off the cobwebs, make sure I'm ready to photograph what I want to photograph, something really small, and this is going to be a nice test of the lens. So this lens actually, this is the Tamron 18-300, which is my kind of go-to lens for most things. It pretty much lives on my camera these days, and I highly recommend it. If you haven't watched my review of this lens, you can watch it up here if you're interested. but this lens is actually best for close-up photography at about 60 to 70 millimeters or 50 to 70 millimeters. So I've got it at the moment at about 50 millimeters, and I'm going to see how close I can get without using the extension tubes, whether I can fit everything in the frame as I want it. So you can hear the camera clicking away there. That is because my camera is able to focus bracket. So what I do, I've spoken about it before plenty of time on the channel, but what I do is I set the camera to focus as close as I want it in the frame, and then it will move the plane of focus automatically throughout the frame. And I usually set it for about 110 shots, and it automatically stops when it reaches infinity, basically. So this is a really helpful tool for my close-up and macro photography. I find it really, really useful this time of year. The other thing that I haven't mentioned yet that is super useful is this. So that's my sit pad. Again, spoken about it loads of times on the channel before, but I really find this so useful for getting nice and low to the ground, kneeling down. I'm not having to wear like waterproof trousers or anything like that, and I'm not getting dirty at all. So this really comes in handy this time of year. Right, so I've just stopped it doing the focus bracketing. It's focused as much of the frame as I need, so I really don't need it going all the way to infinity for this shot, because I actually want the background to be nice and blurry. So this hopefully will come out really well. I'm really happy with it, and as I said, I haven't had to use those extension tubes yet, but this next shot I definitely will, because I found something really tiny. So rather annoyingly now, I've actually got to put my center column back on my tripod, which, as I said before, is quite a faff. And I'm actually a little bit different to quite a few photographers, because I know some people hate the center column. They think it automatically means that your shots are going to be wobbly and stuff like that. But I actually really enjoy using it. I think it makes things so much easier. You know, you're able to move the camera up and down on the tripod without having to move all three individual legs. So yeah, I just imagine that's so annoying, you know, not having the center column there. So if I'm not trying to get low to the ground, I actually always have the center column on. But like I said, for that shot, I definitely wanted to be nice and low, and as low as possible, really. I was pretty much touching the ground there. So I actually didn't want the center column on it, but this time I want it back. So this is how small we're actually going next, guys. You can see all of this white stuff here, that's a slime mold. So we're not going to bother with that for today. That's really cool in its own right, but yeah, it's not a video for today. But what we're looking at is this. So this is a tiny little browny orange fungi, and it's just coming out of this little hole here. So I'm going to try and get a photo of it. The light is really fading now, so I'm going to be as quick as possible. But what I love about this fungi is that it's actually got quite a nice texture on the top of it, and I think that will come out really well if I get nice and close to it. So I've already tried with the camera just by itself. It definitely won't get close enough. So I'm going to whack those extension tubes on and see how it turns out. So a couple of other invaluable tools to me when I'm doing close-up photography to go along with the sit pad was the white bag that you saw at the beginning of the video. I find that really, really helpful just to put my gear on, especially at this time of year when everything's really damp and muddy, and you know, your gear is just going to get ruined if it's sitting straight on the ground a lot of the time. So that's really helpful. Another one, a decent knife. It doesn't have to be a knife, but I find a knife to be really helpful. It just helps really, like, placing things within the image and moving things. You know, I don't do too much of it, but yeah, I find this to be really helpful just to kind of move things around and place them in the scene where I want them, because we're talking really small here. So you know, sometimes, you know, a little leaf might actually end up really big in the frame, and I just want to move that out of the way without damaging the fungi that I'm shooting. And the last piece of gear is this here, and this is my head torch. And oh, not the red one, we don't need it, mood lighting. We want the normal one like that. So this helps to just lift some of the shadows, you know, create some nice highlights sometimes. You know, you can backlight the scene. It just helps a little bit. And with that white bag, you can actually use it as a diffuser actually, and it just helps to make a nice balanced light across the scene, especially when you're working in really deep shadows like in the middle of the day. I find this really useful. So all I'm going to do with these extension tubes, I'm going to just pop them down to one side here on my trusty sit pad. So I pop that there, and then lens off, extension tubes on. They go on, lens back on again, and there you have it. So now I have those extension tubes in between the camera body and the lens, and that's going to allow me to get quite a bit closer. So let's see how it works out. So as luck would have it, I've ended up actually picking a really awkward mushroom, which is annoying. You can see the really stupid position my tripod's in. So actually only 2 of the feet are working at the moment. This one's stuck straight up in the air. And also it's really tricky to get the balance between that minimum focus distance and actually having a working distance between me and the fungi. So if I go any wider, it means I've got to get really, really close to the point where I'm actually going to be touching the piece of wood that the fungi is growing on. And then if I end up coming away from it, it means I've got to zoom in, and then my minimum focus distance gets longer and longer, basically. So it's a tricky one. So the camera's clicking away. I've had to bump up my ISO in the end because the light level is fading so quickly. It ended up that it was taking about 25-second exposures, which was going to be, I'll probably be here till midnight trying to take this one shot. So in the end, I've gone for a 3.2 second exposure, ISO 640. So I am degrading my image quality there, but I was just concerned that with those really, really long exposures, any little movements from me around the base of the camera, I'm going to end up causing some camera shake there. So I was concerned about that. The other thing is, I really need to get a wriggle on. I need to basically get out of here within the next 15 minutes because otherwise it's going to be dark. So yeah, it's 6:30 now. I was thinking I would get to this other fungi and it would be a nice little finale. Hopefully I get there. Yeah, let's see how long this takes and let's see if we get there. So I'm now hightailing it to try and get to that last fungi that I want to capture this evening. It was there a couple of days ago, so I'm hoping that it's still there. And I think it's going to make a fantastic image, but yeah, I've got to get there. It's about 5 minutes away, but yeah, the light is really, really fading fast. So hopefully I have enough light to capture this image. Otherwise I might need that head torch to get back. Okay, so I made it to the spot, and if it looks a little bit brighter than it did in the last scene, that's because it is. It's actually 24 hours later. I got to this spot where I am now, and as you can see above me, it's quite dense and dark, so basically the shot just wouldn't work. I was trying to do long exposures and it was way, way too dark. So I thought, you know what, let's just wait 24 hours. I'll come back tomorrow and I'll have a little bit more time to play with. So I've been tinkering around with this composition and I absolutely love it. It's actually testing the limits of the macro extension tubes, and I'm actually going past what I would usually shoot at in terms of focal length because I want the scene to be that little bit more compressed than I would usually shoot at about 70mm on this lens. So I'm going up to probably, what's that, about 150mm at the moment, just because I want that compression and I want the scene to be nice and tight on these fungi that I've got in front of me. I've actually got 2 types of fungi here, which actually I didn't realise when I first started shooting, but there's a tiny little one there in among those yellow ones. And then I'm just going to have this out of focus moss in the foreground, just allowing me to fully show the scene of this kind of deadwood habitat that we've got here. But the last thing I'm going to do now, I've got my scene all lined up, but I really want to just put on a polarizer, just because I think especially those greens for the moss and the yellows for the fungi, I think that's going to really bring the scene to life and fully show this scene in all its glory, really. Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, shame I had to wait for a whole nother day to get this, but it was worth the wait, I think. just after I finished shooting that yellow fungi, which I'm really happy with that shot, I came round the other side of this log that I've got in front of me, and I just saw this incredible, really psychedelic looking cluster of fungi. By the way, all of these fungi I will try and go back and research and work out exactly what they're called. You know, some of them will be easier than others, but yeah, I'm sure a few of them I'll be able to try and work out. So I've got this shot of these psychedelic looking fungi. I think it looks fantastic. It's probably my favourite shot of all of the ones that I've got so far this evening and the previous evening. Yeah, I think this looks absolutely fantastic. A lovely little cluster, and it's, you know, near enough completely undisturbed by things like slugs and snails. It's been a tricky one again. I've had to lower my tripod all the way down to the ground, so removing that center column so that I can get nice and low. But yeah, I think it was worth it. You know, it's a little bit of a faff to do, but definitely I'm so happy with this shot. But let me know what you think in the comments below about all of these shots that I've got over the last couple of days. Some of them have really been testing the limits of the macro extension tubes to the point where you almost do need a macro lens, but for the most part I love having just my normal zoom lens and adding on these extension tubes, and you know, it's something that I can keep in my bag, I can use when I need it, and it's so much more versatile than having to carry around a dedicated 90 or 105mm macro lens that you only use from time to time. I mean, you do macro all the time, so it would just be a waste to stick in my bag all the time. So this system works really well for me. But let me know what you guys think. Do you prefer something like this, which is much more adaptable and something that you only use from time to time? Or would you prefer to have that supreme quality of a macro lens? Let me know in the comments below. So this is going to be the last shot that I actually have time for this evening, again because the light is starting to go. So this time, this last technique I find works really well, and that is basically finding a log like this one here with a fungi growing out of the top of it. That way what you're able to do is you can actually get your camera nice and low, and it means your background is then really far away from where the fungi is, and it means you can have a lovely out of focus background, and that's exactly what I've got here. So again, this is really testing the limit of this macro extension tubes setup, but basically it's a tiny little white fungi growing from a mossy log. It's probably so small in this frame that you can't even see it there. But what I've done, I've gone really low to the ground, so it's basically as close as I can get to this log here. It's a very precariously placed tripod set up again, but I've gone nice and low, as close as I can, and then that's giving me a really out of focus background behind. And just to give you an idea of the size of this fungi, I'm gonna just put my finger in the frame now. I'll put this on record here. And so I've just got my pinky here, and I'm gonna pop it down into the frame, and that's right next to the fungi. It's not closer to the lens or anything, so that just goes to show you exactly how small it really is. So yeah, we're working with some tiny stuff here, and these extension tubes really can cope with a lot. Well guys, if you've enjoyed this video and you found it useful, please feel free to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that bell as well if you want to stay up to date on everything that's happening on the channel. There's going to be plenty more of videos like this throughout the autumn and winter and everything, so yeah, subscribe if you haven't already and hit that bell. Thank you guys, bye.